Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today I have an assortment of just mind-blowing to terrifying experiences. Before we jump into all that, though, a couple links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. Finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It doesn't cost a cent. Click the like button. Takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon. And folks, please share this video and leave a comment. Why? Well, because all these things really do help this channel to continue to grow and go. And folks, they do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump into today's upload, shall we? Today's first experience. This incident occurred in Memphis, Tennessee. I had started my career as a Memphis police officer a few years previously, in the 1980s. I was on a special assignment at the time. It was roughly 2 in the morning. It was a clear summer night, but it was pretty humid out. I was in my personal vehicle with the top down and listening to the radio. I was still in uniform, including my bulletproof vest and a gun belt with the regular equipment attached. I was heading south on Covington Pike at a good rate of speed. At the time, I was the only one on the road. This part of the road connects the Raleigh-Bartlett area to the Berkeley area. The road is slightly elevated as the surrounding area is low, and running through it is the Wolf River, which is a few miles from here and connects to the Mississippi. This area is commonly referred to by the locals as the Wolf River Bottoms these days. As I was driving in my peripheral vision over to the right just outside of my headlight beams, I noticed something moving fast directly at the front of my car. I immediately slammed on the brakes, thinking that it was a deer about to run across the road, but I couldn't have been more wrong. It came to a screeching halt in the middle of the road right in front of my headlights, not more than 7 feet from my bumper. As we both froze in place, staring at each other for several seconds. It appeared to be 3, maybe 4 feet, but it was also crouched. It could have been closer to 5 had it stood straight up, but I got the impression that its current body posture was its normal way of standing. It had a large head, at least compared to its skinny, slender body. It appeared to be a dark gray and greenish color, similar to the color of an alligator, but the appearance of its skin looked very similar to a human's. It had dark, large, ovular eyes on each side of the upper part of its face, running slanted from the top portion of its head to about the midsection. It was kind of pointing inward to where you'd expect its nose to be. However, from what I could tell, there's no distinct nose, at least none like a human. Below the eyes was a very thin, dark, almost black line, which I assumed was its mouth. It ran from about the same location a human's mouth would be. However, the line ran straight across the lower face in front and then turned upward and slightly back on its head. It had no ears that I could see. Its body and chest area were rounded like a human, but vastly smaller, almost like a child's. Its arms appeared to be longer and somewhat disproportionate to its body. They were very skinny and had an insect-type-like look to them. I could make out hands, but they were also completely folded at the wrist joint. The legs were long because, even with this thing's shortness, I could make out the top of them, even with it so close to the bumper, which was obstructing the bottom half somewhat. They were like its arms, thin and insect-like, but appeared to be jointed. I did notice its chest area moving slightly, like it was breathing, but it seemed slow and steady. I never noticed any genitalia. There was no hair anywhere that I could tell, and I'm not even sure if it was wearing any type of clothing. If it was, it would have been skin tight. I never noticed a tail at any point. My adrenaline was pumping, and it was only a brief period of observation. It again took off like a shot. It was out of my headlights. I could still make out its outline in the darkness, and it was moving like a sprinter. It leapt over the guardrail onto the other side of the road and down the embankment. I will admit that this is not the only bizarre incident that I had during my career, but it definitely was the strangest. I never told anyone on the force about this encounter. In fact, I only mentioned it to a close friend during these many years. I can only identify it as a lizard man or some unknown humanoid. I would have never believed it unless I witnessed it myself. You know, I see why he considers it like a lizard man, just going on the color. But to me, just thinking about the description, like the Dover demon that has this large kind of ovular head with these ovular, like alien-like eyes, about 4 feet tall, kind of hunched over, very long, skinny arms. The Hopkinsville demons, or whatever, Hopkinsville, I don't know. There's so many different descriptions of them. Some say they were troll-like, they had pointed ears. Some say they didn't. Some said they looked like what we'd envision an alien to look like. It almost sounds like an alien what this guy saw, but to move that fast at such a fast rate of speed is interesting too. Or it could have been a crawler. I don't know, definitely a strange one, you know. It fits its speed fits the description of a crawler. Its physical appearance kind of fits an alien. I've never heard of aliens moving at such a high rate of speed, though, you know. Dover demon, I don't think I've heard of that moving quickly, like its locomotion being that quick either. And I've read a couple different kind of experiences involving that too. I don't know. What do you guys think? Today's second encounter. Hello, everyone. Right after I graduated from college in Colorado, I was hired by the National Park Service. I was soon relocated to eastern Tennessee and started working as a ranger in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Since I was newly hired for the job, I was assigned to patrolling and routine safety checks. This allowed me to roam around the huge and beautiful park. A few weeks into my employment, I received a call reporting unknown animal tracks and activity all around their site. When I got there, I saw what was there. I thought one of the other rangers was screwing around with me. There were tracks, but they were not recognizable. The tracks were human-shaped, but huge with talons. I checked out the area and took a few photographs and then helped the family get to another campsite. I later turned over the photos to my supervisor, expecting him to laugh and come clean on the joke, but instead, he was upset thinking that I was playing a prank. I asked him to accompany me to the site, but by the time we got there, the rain had washed away any prints. A couple weeks later, I received another strange call. A campsite had been completely destroyed. The tent shredded and everything thrashed. The campers were not there at the time of the incident. There were not any footprints observed, since it was a dry area, but I found 2 tufts of brown fur and hair on the ground. On this occasion, my supervisor saw the destruction for himself, but recorded it as bear activity. The fur/hair did not look like anything like that of a bear. A couple months later, in early September, I received a call about a lost pet. A young couple had been walking their dog, but it slipped off its collar and ran into the woods. They were quite upset about losing their dog. Myself and 5 other rangers were told to search the woods and recover the lost pet. We started our search in pairs. After we walked for hours covering the area, we did not see any sign of the dog. It was late in the day, and we hadn't received any other calls. We agreed to stay out until dark before returning to the parking lot. As the sun was setting, we turned around and headed for the nearest trail. There was only about another half an hour of daylight remaining, and we felt sorry about not finding their dog, but there was nothing else we could do. As we walked on the trail heading back to this parking lot, we heard growling sounds. We had bear spray with us if need be. It was almost dusk, and now it was harder to see. We couldn't identify the source of the sounds. We continued walking, hoping to leave a bear behind. One of the other rangers pointed out to a tree that looked mauled. There were large scratches and missing branches, just like a black bear would do. I used my flashlight to look at the tree's base. There were the same huge human-like footprints that I had seen several months prior. These prints were definitely not from a bear. I told the other rangers about the clawed footprints I had seen previously, and the look on their faces was chilling, and their apprehension was obvious. As we discussed the prints, we heard crashing and grunting sounds nearby. We kept moving, but faster. I saw a dark shape run past us to our right, but the trees made it impossible to see what it was in any kind of detail. The other rangers noticed as well. It was very bulky and tall, which concerned each of us. Then, without warning, the creature lunged out of the woods onto the trail about 50 feet in front of us. I could see that it had a dog-like face in the twilight as it loudly growled. All 6 of us scattered into the surrounding woods. I tripped on a tree branch and hit my head on a nearby tree. I was dazed for a couple of minutes, but I kept my eyes open in hopes that this creature would not attack me. Several minutes later, we called out to each other and eventually gathered back up on the trail. This creature must have moved off. We didn't hear any further growls or crashing sounds. We quickly ran along the path and arrived to our trucks in the parking lot. We got to our trucks and drove back to the ranger station. The next day, each of us were told to write a written report about our search for the dog. I recorded exactly what we encountered, and as far as I know, the other rangers did as well. But our supervisor never mentioned the incident again. By the way, the lost dog was found unharmed a couple of days later. Today's third encounter. I'd like to start off by saying that I've lived in the Appalachian Mountains all of my life and have experienced many strange things. My family was Irish and settled in West Virginia, but I currently live in the North Carolina portion of these wonderful mountains. That being said, I have learned about a lot of what really lurks in these dark woods, but this was like nothing I had ever experienced before. It all began with my golden retriever, Ozzy, growling like I had never heard before. He literally never growls, so that already had me uncomfortable, but this growl was bone-chilling. It was like he was getting ready to fight for his life or something. I took both him and my other dog out at around 11 p.m. They wouldn't leave my side. I noticed that my workshop door was open, so I walked down to close and lock it up. The entire time he was glued to my side. Ozzy also kept trying to get in between my legs, still growling, with all of his hair sticking straight up like a feral animal. The second I close the door, all hell breaks loose in the woods. It sounded like 50 full-grown men had broken out into a full sprint, tearing through the woods. Trees were shaking and branches were falling. In my life, I had never been so scared. We got back to the house before I crapped my pants, and I got my pistol, mag light out, and figured out what the hell was out there. When the dog and I got back outside, we were surrounded by what sounded like people mumbling. It was everywhere. I shined the light all over the woods and could not see a thing, but the sound was coming from all around me. It sounded as if you got to a full gym of people, and the mumble, you could almost make out words. That's why I don't think it was an animal. I almost immediately felt sick, like I was having a mix between a panic attack and a full swing of the flu. Back inside, it sounded like people were walking around all night. The windows were creaking, and you could clearly hear the sound of footsteps on the graveling. The mumbling never stopped. Every time I got up to check the house, my feet would touch the floor and it would get dead silent. You couldn't hear birds, crickets, frogs, or anything. I was terrified and did not sleep a wink. The air felt thick and evil all night. That's the only way I can explain that feeling. Imagine a soaking wet quilt being tossed over you. That's how I felt. I'm looking for any answers as to what this could be. This was not like a normal spooky story that my grandmother and great uncles used to tell me about the Appalachians. So I'm kind of gathering like feral human vibes. I hate that word, feral human, like I said the other day. But, you know, they do make that kind of weird noise. There was that girl that her and her son were driving into their driveway. For some reason, I think it was North Carolina, but I'm not sure. I know it was in the Appalachia region. But they're driving into their driveway, and she gets out and she can hear this kind of like chatter. And she looks up into the trees, and these things were standing in the trees. Thank God they didn't attack her or her baby, but that's some really scary stuff. I don't know. The Appalachia region is just, it's a real terrifying place. I actually was reading an experience earlier today. I'll probably share it tomorrow or maybe later on today. But a guy had been hunting out there, and he was deep in where probably no human foot has ever stepped, you know? And he heard this like kind of this really sad call, like an animal call, like it was clearly dying. And what he said he saw was this centipede-like creature taking down a full-size deer. And, you know, I mean, I've heard some really creepy ones out of the Appalachia region. And that one really fits into that category of just absolutely mind-blowing. You know? Just 4 or 5 foot centipede. Thick around, taking down a deer. That's nuts. That's scary. Because imagine you being that dude, right? And you're walking, you're just hiking. And you hear pattering in the leaves. And you turn and there's this like 5 foot long, 2 foot around centipede. That's some prehistoric shit right there. Today's next experience. I've had this experience on my mind for a long time, and I've been wanting to share it. I lived in the northern Midwest my entire life, and I've come to appreciate the local lore that comes with it. This experience was my first and only cryptid experience. In my late teens, I worked at a camp for a few summers. The camp was massive, with only about 1/5 of it being equipped for hospitality, dining hall, cabins, shower houses, etc. The rest of it being wilderness. The land had 6 lakes on it, all connected by small rivers. What made this camp practically eerie, however, was it was actually built around a Potawatomi burial ground. I won't get into the legends around the burial mounds, but overall this place checked all the boxes for a B-list horror movie. Now, my job at the camp was sort of a catch-all. I was a program director, lifeguard, cook, gift shop manager. Basically, if they needed a role filled, I was the one doing it. It kept me busy, and I had many long days. I would close the gift shop at about 7 each night. Then head upstairs to the kitchen. I could walk back to my cabin if I wanted, but the cook hated the dark. Babyface crying hated the dark. So I'd help him with the dishes and cutting fruit for breakfast and then walk him back to his cabin. I have one rule though, no flashlights. You can't see very well in the woods if your eyes are focused on a small beam of light. I hated the idea of people or animals sneaking up on us. So every night in the moonlight, I would walk him to his cabin, then walk the public road to mine. My ulterior motive for taking the public road was, well, I'm a smoker, and we have to be good role models for the kids. No smoking in camp, but they can't tell me what to do on public property. My cabin was right on the edge of the hospitality portion of the land. Miles of marshland and forest sat behind my cabin, and fortunately, or unfortunately, I had the cabin to myself. But the weird thing was that every night I would be smoking and walking on that public road, and I would hear screaming in the woods. It sounded like a woman being murdered. I brushed it off the first night. There's public access lake. People get rowdy, sound carries, could be a prank or a fox or an owl. It's the woods, right? But it kept happening. Every night, as soon as I stepped out onto that road, I decided not to let it bother me. I had to be up early every day. No sense of chasing noise in the dark. I'd get to my cabin, spread some tobacco for the land, and sleep soundly every night. Well, the end of the summer came around, and it was bittersweet. You eat 3 meals a day with the same people for 3 months, and they start to grow on you. One goodbye tradition we kept over the years was, on the final new moon of the camp season, the ranger would take the staff for a spirit walk. It was always good fun. He'd share legends of the land with the new staff and try to shake them. We would hike through the back of the camp, around the marshes and lakes, and see what kind of spooky things we could stir up. We all met at the only streetlight on the public road that night, but that year the ranger had his rifle slung over his shoulder. We ran into a cougar the year before, and 2 wolves lived in the back property, so I didn't think much of it. The rules are simple: no flashlights, no jingling keys, no running. If you do run, we might not find you. They were half to scare people, half true. The woods were thick, and the marshes even more dangerous. Everything was going smoothly until we reached a river crossing not far from the public road. It takes you to a clearing just before the trail reconnects with the road behind my cabin. The moment we crossed that bridge, the woods went dead silent. You could hear yourself breathe. That, my friends, is one of the scariest things that can happen to you in the woods when they go silent. And then, just like every night before, a blood-curdling scream rips across the clearing. One of the new staff was about to take off before myself and another grabbed his arm. "That's the screaming I've been hearing," I told my boss. "That's the screaming I hear every night." The ranger shushed everyone. The scream came again, louder this time. The ranger whistled in the direction of the noise, and it whistled back. Suddenly, the screaming surrounded us, behind us, to the right, to the left. The group closed in, shoulder to shoulder, not daring to even breathe. The ranger, ever serious and calm, said barely over a whisper, "We're turning around. Take the bridge back to the trail. We are going the long way." So in hurried steps, we made our way back to that street light and that we had met under without a murmured word. Once we were under the light, I could tell the ranger was actually shaken up. This is the same man that was charged by a cougar in the dark and brushed it off. "I need a cigarette." "You haven't smoked in a couple years. I need a cigarette." I was not about to argue with a man holding a rifle, so I obliged. After a few drags, he muttered, "I don't want to scare anyone, but I know only one creature that can mimic human voices like that." I said, "A mimic?" I said, not even thinking. I was in shock. All summer, I walked that road, and this thing was out there screaming, trying to lure me in. That's when he said, "Quite possibly." He first thought that it was the neighboring property owners looking for their dog, calling out for them. So he whistled. Then he explained the gun. All spring, he was finding deer strewn around the property. Not unusual, being the woods and all, but there were so many and so brutally taken down. He said these things looked like they had been hit by cars in the middle of the woods, absolutely mangled. More bizarrely, no other animal would touch them. No tracks that said bear or wolf or cougar. He was worried with something bringing a big game down like that, so he did bring his rifle. No one said much after that. My boss got sage from her cabin and gave everyone who asked a blessing. We were all pretty shaken. After that, I changed cabins. I didn't own much in general at that time, so I wasn't troubled in the least to get off the public road. Didn't even care that I had to row out in the middle of the lake to have a cigarette. I wasn't stepping foot out on that road again, and I'm a little sorry to say I never stepped back onto that property again. Call me superstitious or lily-livered, but I couldn't bring myself to go back into those woods, not even if they paid me more. So, a lot of people think that that whistle, I've heard people talk about, "Oh, it's a skinwalker. It's a Wendigo." I believe neither of that is true. First and foremost, if you've been with the channel, you know how I feel about skinwalkers, the Yenadalushi. Second, you know that I am Native American. My family, I have family that live in Hogansburg or the Akwesasne Reservation, which the word Akwesasne means beating drum, pheasant beating drum. And our lore, culturally, our lore is the Wendigo. And there's a beautiful painting I saw when I was younger of the Wendigo in a museum up there. And it does not have deer antlers like people say and Hollywood says. That is just idiotic. Like the Rougarou, it has its own lore. The Cajun and the Creole people believe the Rougarou is a shapeshifter. It can look like a dog man. It can look like an alligator man. It can look like black mist. I think the Rougarou is more or less Native American tradition down in that region of the United States. The Wendigo has its own, a very emaciated looking human being, almost crawler-like, then a large kind of white furry creature with a tail, and then a kind of whitish wind mist, this just weird kind of wind. Just so I myself think that quite possibly these whistling noises that people hear could be a creature that comes out of a portal. Something far more dangerous than a Dogman, a Bigfoot. Just like that story that I told you guys a couple of minutes ago, that centipede thing. Maybe that thing came out of a portal. That's why it looks so prehistoric and it's so large, because the alternate dimension that it came from, maybe it came from back in time, or maybe in the near future in this alternate dimension. Who knows? But I really think that whatever comes out of these portals are just pure evil. And I don't know why. I don't think anything is good about crossing into a portal at all. That may be my own superstition, but you got a portal, keep it away from me. Today's next encounter. This experience is from my ex-girlfriend's perspective, and she still to this day has no idea what she encountered. So to begin, this experience happened in 2018. I arrived in this small rural town near Cape May. The company I was working for at the time was sending me to go door to door, advertising cable and Wi-Fi that they wanted me to sell. I was getting weird vibes all throughout the day, as the town itself is very small and a bit creepy, with people staring at me or giving me the cold shoulder the entire day. It seemed like a lot of the town folk that I encountered that day were on edge, and it was a weird, tense atmosphere that I shrugged off. As people are weird all the time, I continued my job, chugging a Red Bull to keep me going, which did not affect me at all, surprisingly. Besides the weird atmosphere, the scenery was actually quite pretty once you got off the main road. I had to stop at different streets, and some were in the woods, on long and seemingly beautiful endless roads. It was quite scenic. Just before sunset, I scheduled to visit a few houses on the small peninsula. To get to this peninsula, you had to go down a very long road, past the summer camp area, past a trailer park, past the woods, and then you'd finally find yourself in a small open area with a bay marsh, a couple of small expensive homes, and shore access. The houses were so close to the water it seemed like a code violation, but I'm sure they were built to withstand storms, since they looked awfully expensive. Every house had its own theme. The area was mostly deserted. Only one house had someone inside whom I had talked to after knocking on his door. I was so distracted looking at the houses and scenery that I didn't notice how fast sunset was approaching. I came to the realization that I should start heading back to avoid being alone on a long deserted pathway in the woods. As I am a smaller female, I'm never comfortable after dark in isolated places, especially without cell service. I was making my way down the path. So far, so good, as it wasn't completely dark yet. As I approached the wooded area of the road, I was walking a bit faster, since there were no streetlights and the sunlight was rapidly disappearing. As I walked at a decent fast pace, I noticed something. The woods were eerily quiet. All that life that I heard going on before was now gone. No crickets, no birds, just pure silence. I stopped in my tracks and got chills ran down my spine as I felt the feeling of being watched. I looked around in the dark woods for any sudden movements, and then, like clockwork, something up ahead made its way out of the tree line. It looked to be some type of large animal. My brain went into overdrive, analyzing whatever this thing was. Was it a bear? A dog? No, it looked like a large dog, but dogs do not get this big. Though I was intimidated by its large size, whatever it was had not noticed me. Even though I was scared, I also didn't want to walk back and go into that one man's house. As a woman, I would rather take my chances with a wild animal than be alone with a man. I don't know, in a deserted holiday neighborhood, let alone in a deserted holiday neighborhood. Suddenly, as I was thinking, this large animal in the distance finally noticed my presence. It was observing me, not entirely sure of what to do with me. There wasn't enough light anymore to see the animal's face, but I felt unusually frightened. Whatever I was looking at was definitely far too big to be a bear with a shoulder height of at least 5 feet on all fours, which is comparable to the size of a brown bear. The mass on this creature was extensive, as the outline of what I could see looked like wolf on steroids. It was very muscular. I also noticed that the outline of its face was very similar to a German Shepherd or a wolf, as it had perked ears and a long snout. In the heat of the moment, I could only hear the sound of my heart beating as fear and adrenaline started to crawl its way into my bloodstream. It felt like time was standing still, and then it dawned on me. What I was looking at was no normal animal as it stood there. It was simply too big to be any animal I recognized from New Jersey's catalog of fauna. And if it wanted to attack me, I would be powerless against it. It was simply far too big. Though, to calm myself down, I threw the idea that this creature was out of the ordinary, because I felt like this was the only rational thing to think. I made my brain go back to the idea of this thing maybe being a large dog or coyote. Also didn't believe in cryptids and was completely unaware of the size of coyotes. So I made a quick decision, realizing that this could very well be a life and death situation. I came to the conclusion that this very large dog-like creature was probably a skittish coyote that I could scare off, at least temporarily, to calm my nerves down. What other choice did I have? The longer I kept standing there, the more aggressive I might come across to this animal. And I don't want this thing to get territorial or get the idea that I was easy prey. So I decided that I was make the most hideous, loud, confusing, and startling scream/howl I could muster, and just sprint the rest of the way. After I screeched this hideous sound out of my body as hard as I could, the animal quickly changed its body language to a defense. But then it quickly changed its mind to decide it wasn't worth a fight, as it ran a decent distance into the woods. Not too far, though. I decided to sprint as fast as I could past the area and beyond. I sprinted until I reached the end of the road and noticed there was a summer camp area with streetlights near me. I rested on the top of a table, out of breath and feeling my heart was going to pound out of my chest. However, I was still very shaken up and still felt like I was being watched. I kept my eyes on the tree line. My eyes were darting around, looking for any sign of this creature. Once I felt like the coast was clear, I located the next house I was scheduled to visit, and I quickly made my way over. I met a nice family who ended up buying cable from me, and I told them what had happened to me that night and how I was treated by the locals. The lady of the family, who I presume to be the mother, said, "I don't know why they sent you out here alone. These woods are dangerous after dark. And they're creepy people who live out there." The impression she was giving me was there was animal encounters she couldn't explain. The impression she was giving me was that there were animal encounters she couldn't explain, and that there were ex-convicts in the area, and people who should have been arrested but have not been. She was equally concerned about people as she was the animals around here. This gave me goosebumps. How many times today could my life have been taken? They were extremely concerned for my safety and told me to contact my team leader so I could get picked up. They said they didn't want me to go outside again and that I should call it quits for the night and not make any other house calls. To this day, I still have no idea what that creature was. There are strange things in these woods, things people do not speak about or cover. I felt like the townsfolk of that town knew something about what I encountered. So weird creatures I encountered in those woods. So, Dogman, obviously. Or, who knows. Sounds like a Dogman. Wolf face, German Shepherd face, perked ears, very large. Can you... I just picture that scene, this small little girl, you know, like my daughter Belle's size. She's like 5'3", 103 pounds, 104 pounds, screeching at this 7-foot tall Dogman, and the Dogman kind of like cocks its head and just walks away. That's nuts. That'd be the last thing I would do. I think I would start walking backwards, keeping my eye on it. I don't know if I'd want to screech at the damn thing. Let's get into tonight's final encounter. It was New Year's, the last one that came. Me and my friends ventured into a park at 1 a.m. as there were cops on the road and we didn't want to get done drinking or smoking. We head pretty far in and hide behind some big fallen trees, setting up our picnic rug. We hung out there for a little while until everything gets real silent, like dead silent. There were still people further up the road at the lookout we had come from, but we couldn't hear them anymore. There was no noise. My friend points out that he can hear sort of a whistling in the woods, almost a human sound. When I listen in, I can hear it as well. It sounds like a human whistling to another human. A few whistles at first and then response, no musical whistles. It almost seemed more like communication. At this point, we decided to leave, all of us getting weird vibes. I should mention that there were 5 of us that night. We decided to cut further into the park and get back to the main road. It's not a big park at most, maybe 2 kilometers in length. So we knew we could reach the road in no time, especially as we were near the bottom. But as we got further down, it became apparent that we were now lost. We try and follow the path, but it is not maintained. Lots and lots of grass, making it everywhere confusing. We try a few offshoots of path, but one of them leads to a tourist road that they're all overgrown. We see a bus stop down the hill, but decide we're going to keep trekking. As we can see, it's down a nasty embankment. We are catching our breath and staring off again. When me and my friend, we'll call him Baz, heard this blood-curdling scream in the trees ahead of us. It sounded almost like a woman or a little girl screaming at full pelt, but it had a strange sort of recorded quality, almost like if you heard it through a speaker or from really far away. Strangely, it sounded close though. Of course, everyone froze. It looks at me, and I just say, "Possum?" I've lived in this particular area of the hills my whole life. Essentially, I've done many night walks. Not once have I heard a possum or an owl make that noise. We continue to look for our way out with no luck, an increasing feeling of dread and fear creeping into our minds. The darkness is thick, like the thicker it should be. The moon was actually being open. At this point, we are at our wits' end. We follow a path, and we can see the road now. But in our path is the largest holy bush I had ever seen, just rife with spikes. We go back yet again to where we started, and my partner gives me his walking stick to get through the bush. Immediately, I flip it around and hold it like a bat. We wander a few more steps. It was like a miracle. A car drove past, illuminating the bus stop, clearly less than 10 meters from us. We practically ran out of the bush, scrambling down the embankment and speed walking home. It's worth mentioning, I have since researched Australian nocturnal animals, practically those in the Dandenong Range, and I am yet to find anything that sounded even close to what we heard. To this day, I am not entirely sure what was in the bushes, but didn't want help from my friend. Made a skinwalker joke when we first heard the whistling. Anyway, thank you for letting me share. So, another whistling, now in Australia. Yowie? 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 I've been asked a couple different times by new subscribers if Dogman is in Australia, and I say, hey, I've got subscribers that cruise around that beautiful country in a caravan, and they have had their own Dogman experience, and Australia covers up these attacks as well. So anyway, with that being said, guys, thank you for supporting the channel. Your support is what keeps this channel growing and going, and also what makes it special. I truly hope you enjoyed this upload as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. Everyone, please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, our pets, our family, and friends. These creatures are real. They're out there. They're dangerous. Share this information with the people you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions. Never stop searching for the truth. And God bless.